Hannibal finally shows us his face. We would have given anything to see the face of the legendary African general, and here he is, after years of digging in books, right in front of us. This is a Carthaginian coin with a distinctive black man on the front and an elephant on the back. How do we know that Shehu Beulah Bassa is named Hannibal? The excavations in Carthage, present-day Tunisia, only reveal black skeletons, as we have shown here. Based on this, it is asserted with a certainty that Hannibal was black as his people. The Carthaginian coins only represented deities or high-ranking persons in the state hierarchy. This coin was probably made in 217 BC and found near Lake Trasimeno in Italy, the year and place of a great victory by Hannibal against the Roman Empire. The elephant on the back is an elephant from India, recognizable by its small ears. Surus, Hannibal's beloved elephant, who carried him during his victories and who was the general's only elephant to arrive at Lake Trasimeno, was an elephant from India. The man in the front wears a crown of laurels, a sign of victory, an attribute of rulers, and was inherited from the Greek deity Apollo. Hannibal had just triumphed and had some affection for the character of Apollo. There are other Carthaginian coins depicting a black man and an elephant, but this coin has special features and was found in a remarkable place. It is therefore a commemorative coin for the victory on Lake Trasimeno. We can see that this coin depicts Shehu Beulah Bassa, Hannibal, and as we can see, he was extraordinarily African. It's hard to flatten a nose and make your lips bigger than that. Ankh Uja Seneb to the car of the ancestor Hannibal. The Egyptian DNA case, Truth and Lies. On May 31, 2017, all the media in the Western world announced that the DNA of 90 Egyptian mummies had just been deciphered. They all appeared to be of Middle Eastern and European origin. The information goes around the world, delighting the followers of White Egypt and shaking the Africans and the African diaspora who had already made this civilization their own. We have taken possession of the study, and we are going to show here that it is dishonest from start to finish, and that Egyptian civilization, if any proof is needed, belongs exclusively to the black African world. Queen Jemt, daughter of Pharaoh Ramesu Ka Waset Rameses XI, and wife of Pharaoh priest Herhor. The father was one of the last pharaohs of the great indigenous Egyptian dynasties around 1070 BC. As you can see, she was undoubtedly African. Probably her hair was involuntarily straightened during the mummification process, as we have shown here. How can you determine which people are at the origin of a civilization? The choice of locations. Imagine today the French civilization has disappeared, and then 2,000 years from now we will be trying to determine which people were at its origin. The first thing we should do is consult the documents of the period to find out what the main places of the ancient territory were. Then we would realize that the greatest people in France were buried in royal tombs in the Paris region and also in the Pantheon in Paris. After excavating the remains, it would be easy to determine that French civilization was the work of whites. On the other hand, if one went to Massa in the south, so many Berbers and Arabs would be found in the cemeteries, and one would wrongly conclude that France was the work of the Berbers and Arabs. It's the same with American civilization today. You would have to go to Arlington Cemetery in Virginia, not a Miami cemetery filled with Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, etc. The choice of the period. Likewise, the historical documents would show that there was an influx of Arabs and Berbers into the city of Massa in the middle of the 20th century. If we insist on knowing who the city's founders were, the older remains, especially those of lower antiquity, would be proved. So in order to determine the people at the origin of a civilization, we should start everything with a historical documentation in order to know which places to search and which time period to consider. What do the Egyptian historical documents say? They say this: 4000 BC, birth of the very first dynasty between Sudan and southern Egypt. Around 3300 BC, will eventually conquer the entire north, from 3300 BC to 1730 BC. Only these dynasties from southern Egypt and Sudan ruled. Between 1730 BC and 1540 BC, a dynasty of invaders called Hyksos, probably whites, conquered northern Egypt. The indigenous kings withdrew to their original bastion in the south. Between 1540 BC and 1070 BC, the indigenous dynasties conquered the north and ruled the whole kingdom again. Between 1070 BC and 663 BC, black Libyans who were associated with whites ruled over the north, while indigenous authority withdrew to the south. Then the Sudanese came and ruled the whole area. Between 663 BC and 332 BC, there was a chaotic succession of white Persian invaders and Egyptians. From 332 BC, from AD 641 to AD 641, the Greeks and Romans who came through the north dominated, and from AD 641 until today we have Arab rule with Turkish and British intervals. What does that mean? This means that if we want to genetically determine who the ancient Egyptians were, we should take the remains of the kings from the south in the Valley of the Kings in Luxor, and the remains that date back to 4000 BC. And 1730 BC and those between 1540 BC and 1070 BC should be given the highest priority. It has already happened. What do genetic research to date say about the ancient Egyptians? The main study dates back to 2012 and was carried out by the US laboratory DNA Strain. It was about 3 of the most famous pharaohs, Amenhotep III, Tutankhamun, and another pharaoh whose identity is uncertain. It should be Smenkhare or Akhenaten. Akhenaten's maternal grandparents, influential priests Yuya and Tuya, were also included in the study. These kings ruled around 1400 BC. So in the reliable time, the result is undeniable. They come from Africa, south of the Sahara. DNA strain results. Genetic compatibility index of 326 with Southern Africa, 323 with the Great Lakes, and 83 with Central Africa and West Africa. This study is the absolute reference in genetics to the ancient Egyptians. For comparison, the Semitic whites, Europeans or Berbers are compatible between 3 and 7. In addition, in 2012, one of the Sahih Hawass et al. Study published in the BMJ, the pharaoh Ramesu Hekayunu, Ramesses III, who around 1200 BC ruled, carries the E1B1A gene, which is an African gene. This gene is a quasi-specific for the population in sub-Saharan Africa and for the Africans in America. With the Angolans, for example, it is a maximum. Westerners have remained silent about these two studies, which contrasts with today's media hype. You are pretending that this study is the first. In 2013, DNA strains continued with the DNA of Ramesu Hekayunu, Ramses III, and his son Pentaweret. Their results are similar. They relate to the peoples of the Great Lakes, Southern Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, and the Horn of Africa. Left, Tutankhamun and his wife Queen Ankh-Sen-Imana, daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. On the right of the great pharaoh Imanahotep Hekawaset, Amenhotep III, father of Akhenaten. Pharaoh Ramesu Hekayunu, Ares III on the left. Pharaoh Akhenaten with his African facial features on the right. What was the effect of the study that is making so much noise today? A study by Johannes Krause from the Max Planck Institute in Germany selected 91 mummies that were found in one cemetery in northern Egypt. It's a single location. Was Professor Johannes Krause afraid of bringing the Egyptians to the south where they are overcrowded? Here in the north of Egypt is the place where Johannes Krause mummies come from. This picture is from his own paper. Look for down to the right. It's Luxor where the pharaohs are buried. Even when Pharaoh died in the north, his body was taken south, just as people still prefer to be buried in their villages today. The Egyptians knew very well that they came from the south. But that is not all. How many of these 91 mummies are dated in the periods of interest? 4,000, 1,730, 1,540, 1,070. So, simple answer 4. 4 of 91 selected mummies come from the great reign of the native Egyptians. Only 4 mummies date from before 1070 BC. All others are new. And how many of these 91 come from the rule of the Greek and Roman whites? 48. That is, most of them. This sample is invalid and cannot determine the origin of the ancient Egyptians. Should we continue our criticism of this study, we can stop here, but let's be kind and move on. How many of the 91 mummies were actually genetically analyzed to determine who the ancient Egyptians were? Get this, 3. Johannes Krause begins with the words, "He represents 90 mitochondrial genomes as well as genome-wide data sets from 3 individuals who came from Egyptian mummies. The study that is making so much noise around the world today that is supposed to determine who the Egyptians were is based on just 3 mummies. 3. How many of these 3 mummies are from the great rule of the native Egyptians? Simple answer, 0. The mummy JK2134 dates from the period between 776 BC and 669 BC. The mummy JK2911 from the period 769-560 BC. The mummy JK2888 is from the year 97 to 2 BC. All of these mummies date from the time when Egypt was dominated by white foreigners in the north or had a large white immigrant population. These mummies cannot be representative of the people or the kings of ancient Egypt in any way. This is a summary picture of the study in question. 3 mummies. In short, the mummies should say that the Egyptians were white, come from a single and irrelevant site, were taken in the north of Egypt, which was repeatedly under the rule of white foreigners and was partially populated by white immigrants. Are only 3, which is ridiculously small, for none of them do not date from the time of the rule of the great indigenous Egyptians. All of them come from the late period, a time of decline and occupation, when the whites were infiltrated from the north. This sample therefore is a value 0, and there is no point in discussing it any further. So do Westerners want to be proud that they found 3 whites out of 10 million ancient Egyptians? You can have it. We are not stingy. According to their heretical logic, in 2000 years Jamaicans will be found in the British tombs, and it is then concluded that Queen Elizabeth II and the English were black. In 2000 years Indians will be found in the Tanzanian graves. It is also concluded that Jewish Nyerere and the Tanzanians were Indian. In addition, there was recently talk of the University of Tübingen in Germany, to which Mr. Krause is a member. They claimed that a European monkey with tied premolars was the world's first hominid, meaning that humanity was not born in Africa. So we're dealing with racist ideologies here. Do I really thought we were going to start with the sensational title of this study and not go deep into it? This is a terrible misjudgment of the new generation of Africa created by Sheikh Anta Diop. We want to say that nothing and no one will ever bring us back into the mental state of the eternal slave. We will have no concession or compassion for science, for those who dare to struggle for our indestructible bond with our glorious ancestors. Our determination is total. Black Africans are the civilians of humanity, and they will never get over this historic pedestal again. They invented civilization in Africa and introduced it to Asia, America and Europe. Everyone will learn to return to their place in history. This new pride is infinite trust in our abilities. We will rebuild Africa. However, given the shock wave this study has created in black communities, we believe that the greatest possible number of Africans must acquire solid scientific knowledge in order to decipher the lies contained in the scientific literature. But above all, it is also urgently necessary that we control our media space in order to make our voice heard. It is the voice of truth, life, health, and strength through the energies of our ancestors. The Pharaoh Kamesu, accompanied by Nehesiru, Sudanese. Illustration by Angus McBride. Pharaoh Kamesu with the Nehesiru, Sudanese. Illustration by Angus McBride. It is 1730 BC, when foreign invaders invaded Egypt. The ancient Egyptian historian Manethon described them in these words. Unexpectedly, some men of an unknown race from the east had the audacity to invade our land, Egypt. Without difficulty or struggle, they brutally took it over. These people were called Hyksos, what as much as royal pastors means, because Heka in the holy language means king and source, in colloquial language means pastor, nomad. Your barbarism was perfect, Manethon, and found the Hyksos to burn cities, destroy temples, and enslave women and children. The black local leadership withdrew towards Waset Tebes, leaving the Delta and central Egypt in the hands of invaders, obviously white nomads from Asia. After almost 180 years of occupation, the southern kings began to recapture the country, and the legendary reunification maker of Egypt appeared, Neb-Hephtires Yahmesu. Around 1550 BC, the southern kings Seke and Retar began a vigorous war to liberate the country and was killed by the Hyksos during the battle. His son, also a brilliant war chief named Kamesu, took over Middle Egypt at the end of masterfully won battles. When Pharaoh Kamesu died unexpectedly, his brother, who was only between 5 and 7 years old, was appointed to carry out power. Yahmesu was young. The true rulers, that is, his grandmother Tetesheri and his mother Akhotpu, exercised them legitimately according to the matriarchal tradition of Africa. Akhotpu carried out her duties as a real war chief and strengthened the reclaimed territories through her older son Kamesu.